This was a difficult video to make because if I'm being honest, I'm not all that interested in my own story anymore, in my history. I thought that there could be some insightful things within this video, some little nuggets that people could appreciate. So I made myself tell a personal story, and I hope you enjoy it. I hope that there is something to take away from it. So I guess this is story time about why I embarked on my spiritual journey, or at least the primary catalyst that I can pick out. And by spiritual journey, I just mean self-investigation, the journey to figure out what I fundamentally am, what my true nature is, and as well, the nature of reality, because the two go hand in hand. Let me add some context by saying I suspect that I'm on the spectrum. I don't have a diagnosis, but the suspicion is enough to satisfy me, and it makes so much sense for the past interactions that I've had where I seemingly missed social cues and created awkward situations. So let's just say I'm on the spectrum. Being on the spectrum, I suppose I developed a special interest around the age of 5, which was the nature of reality. For whatever reason, I developed a deep curiosity in the fundamental nature of things. What is stuff made out of? And why is there anything at all? I know that these are quite common for people to ponder, but for most people it seems to be passing shower thought. And for me, I took it to heart. I took it as my life's goal to figure it out. I just wasn't going to be satisfied living a life where I didn't at least try to figure it out. And so I completely obsessed over these topics of phenomenal existence and what I truly am. Because being on the spectrum, obviously social interactions don't come naturally. And so I learned early on that there is something different over here about me and how I interact with people. It doesn't seem to happen automatically in the way that everyone deems socially appropriate. So I have to hyper-examine social interactions to learn what's appropriate, what follows the social etiquette, and then manually present that way to people. And all of that, as a kid, caused me to examine the nature of my own self. Because I learned that I had to mask around people, essentially, to put on a particular facade for my own social survival. And that applied within my family, it applied around the peers at school. Any setting, I felt like I had to mask. And so that led me to deeply ponder the nature of myself and what it means to be authentic. Because it seemed like other people were being authentic. Other people were being their natural selves, and there was something that I was lacking. And that led to many phases of depression, where no matter what I tried, I just couldn't fit in. And that's upsetting, to be a human, which humans are a social species, and to not be able to fit in socially. So that's something that was off and on for many years, dealing with my inability to fit in. But it was through my pursuit to fit in that I became an expert at masking and pattern recognition as well. I began to notice other people who I previously thought were being authentic in their social interactions. They weren't quite being authentic. It's not that they were being deceitful, but the truth is, they didn't know themselves at all either. Only the difference was They were deluding themselves into thinking that they were being authentic. Most people, seemingly, don't deeply, persistently inquire into their own nature of being. And now that's not a judgment, but nevertheless, this revelation that other people didn't actually know what they are, and they were also just putting on a facade for society, that was very liberating in and of itself. Because I went from thinking that everyone else had it together and I didn't, to realizing we all equally don't have it together, but actually I felt like I had some sort of advantage because I was at least aware of this and passionate about getting it together. So even in my own head, when I would think thoughts to myself, I didn't even want to be inauthentic with myself to myself. And so I wouldn't only hyper examine my social interactions with other people, I would hyper examine my own internal dialogue. So I would notice the thought streams come through. I would notice that there's apparently, in thought form, someone speaking and then a listening to that speaking. And I would just inquire, why am I engaging in all of this ceaseless thought? I know what I'm thinking. I already know this stuff. So why am I thinking it to myself to affirm that I know it? And this inquiry itself led to meditation without me even knowing that it was meditation at the time. But I began to become more and more skilled at watching the thoughts and stopping them right in their tracks when I realized it was just going to be a waste of time and energy to just follow thought streams unrelentingly. So I began meditating more and more often and eventually noticed the noticing. I became aware of the fact that there's an underlying awareness to experience, not to objectify it. Obviously, it's not a separate thing, but you know what I'm pointing to with that word. It's a useful tool, a useful concept. So I noticed the awareness and eventually recognized I am that, which isn't really divided in any way. It is unchanging and yet appearing as all of the changes that come and go. So we're far enough through the pipeline now to be caught up with recent times, and so as to not turn this video into a completely different topic about what the nature of reality fundamentally is and go into all of those details, I suppose I'll just tie it up here. I'm not saying that if you're on the spectrum, you can absolutely become awakened, or if you're not on the spectrum, you can't. This is just a personal opinion. I think it could serve as an advantage because people who are on the spectrum, they do have to become hyper vigilant, if not through a natural tendency, through social pressure. They have to become hyper vigilant of what is and how they present themselves in the world. So I think it may be a particular advantage to people on the spectrum if they become interested in things of this sort, the nature of reality or the nature of oneself. I think it might be a particular advantage. And that's not to try to make myself or anyone else feel special, but simply to talk about it because it's interesting, isn't it? It's just an interesting conversation all around. It's not about specialness because ultimately everyone is the same essence. So there's no hierarchy, there's no specialness at the end of the day.